Imagine a future where, well, not only do we live longer lives, but we actually live better. A future where those later years, they're marked by energy, by function, just a real zest for life, not decline.
That's the ultimate goal, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And it seems like science is increasingly zeroing in on exactly that. So, welcome everyone to Tomorrow Unveiled, your guide to the biggest, most solid advancements shaping what's next.
Absolutely. And today, this is our longevity update. We're focusing specifically on breakthroughs from just this past week, June 25th to July 2nd, 2025.
Very current.
Very current. Our research team, they've really dug through a mountain of sources, pulling out the most crucial pieces of information. And crucially, we focused on findings that pop up again and again across different documents.
So we get a reliable picture.
Exactly. A robust view of what's actually moving the needle in, well, functional life extension.
Okay, so our mission today is pretty straightforward. Unpack these discoveries, figure out what they really mean, short-term and long-term, and explore what it means for living not just longer, but, healthier for you, for everyone.
Let's do it.
All right, let's jump right in. There's something getting a lot of buzz, especially because it tackles things systemically. Therapeutic plasma exchange. TPE.
Ah, yes.
PPE.
For those who haven't heard much about it, can you break down what it is and, why it's suddenly hot in longevity circles?
Sure. So TPE is interesting because it's actually an established medical procedure. It's been used for ages for things like autoimmune diseases.
Okay, so not brand new tech.
Not at all. But now it's being repurposed, studied really rigorously for its potential in, well, slowing aging. The latest findings our team compiled came from a small clinical trial, but the results were, well, they were quite remarkable.
And that's so.
Participants getting TPE, especially when they also got something called IV, that's intravenous immunoglobulin, basically concentrated antibodies for immune support.
Right.
They saw an average biological age reduction of 2.61 years.
Wow, over 2.5 years younger biologically. Exactly. And even TPE on its own showed a reduction of 1.32 years. Pretty significant.
And how do they measure that? Not just looking younger, I assume.
No. This was measured using comprehensive multi-omics platforms, really deep molecular level stuff. Looking at changes in epigenetics, proteomics, gives you a very detailed picture of the body's state.
Okay.
Plus, they actually observed a restoration of a more youthful immune cell profile. And that's a really key indicator of vitality.
That does sound incredibly promising, almost like winding back the clock a bit. But like with all cutting-edge science, there have to be some caveats, right? Some questions.
Absolutely. You're right to push on that. It's exciting, but we need perspective.
So what did the researchers flag as limitations in that TPE study?
Well, first off, it was pretty small, only 42 adults, and it was short, just 3 to 5 months long.
Okay, not a huge group or time frame.
Right, and the researchers themselves pointed out what they called diminishing returns after the first few sessions.
Meaning the effect wore off.
It suggests the benefits might level off, or maybe they're transient, or perhaps need a different schedule long-term. We don't know yet. And importantly, what they measured, the primary endpoints, were molecular biomarkers.
Like the epigenetics you mentioned.
Exactly. Changes in gene expression, protein levels, powerful information, yes, but they're not direct measures of functional outcomes.
Like, did people actually feel better, think clearer, move easier?
Precisely. We don't have that functional data from this particular study. Also, a key thing, there wasn't a control group that only got IVI.
Ah, so it's hard to tell how much of the effect was the TPE itself versus the IVI part.
Exactly. It makes it tricky to isolate TPE's specific contribution. And then, of course, there's the practical side. For healthy people looking into this, it's expensive.
Right. Not likely covered by insurance for anti-aging.
Not currently, no. So cost and access are big concerns right now.
Okay, good context. Let's pivot slightly. Moving from that systemic approach to a specific compound, one that many people have heard of, rapamycin. It's been in the longevity discussion for a while.
Oh, yes. Rapamycin is a mainstay.
What's the latest update our team gathered on its potential?
Well, rapamycin is still a major player. A big meta-analysis, one our team looked at, basically confirmed its power. It showed rapamycin extends lifespan in animals almost as effectively as dietary restriction.
Which is considered the gold standard in animal studies, right?
It is. So that's a huge finding, reinforcing its potential. But beyond just lifespan in animals, there's the Pearl study.
That's in humans.
Yes, in healthy older adults aged 50 to 85. And it reported some really interesting functional benefits, though they seem to differ a bit by sex.
How so?
For women, they saw significant improvements in lean tissue mass and also less self-reported pain.
Less pain, better body composition. Sounds good.
And both men and women showed improved bone mineral density, so signs of tangible benefits in people.
Okay, that's encouraging. But
Hmm.
there's always a but, isn't there?
Usually. With rapamycin, while those animal studies and early human results are exciting, trials with related drugs, the analogs, are still ongoing in humans.
So the jury's still out on broad functional benefits in people.
To some extent, yes. We need more proof. And the big known issue with rapamycin is its effect on the immune system. It's an immunosuppressant.
Right, that's its original medical use, isn't it? Preventing organ rejection.
Exactly. So managing that side effect, ensuring safety, that remains a key focus for the research community. It's a balancing act.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift gears again. Because our team highlighted something else, something really fascinating that kind of challenges a core belief about aging.
You must mean inflammaging.
That's the one. For years, we've sort of accepted this idea that chronic, low-level inflammation just comes with getting older.
Yeah.
Unavoidable part of the deal.
Right. Inflammaging. It's been considered almost a hallmark of aging, but there was a major international study covered in the sources our team analyzed that really throws a wrench in that idea.
How did it do that?
By doing something clever. They compared industrialized populations like us with non-industrialized indigenous groups, people living very different lifestyles.
Okay, and what did they find?
They found that inflammaging might not be this universal biological inevitability we thought it was.
Really? So it's not guaranteed.
It seems not. Instead, it looks more like a maladaptive response, a reaction to what they call the exposome of industrialized life.
Exposome. Meaning?
Basically, everything we're exposed to in our environment, modern diet, low physical activity levels, maybe even specific types of infections or lack thereof.
So our lifestyle might be causing this chronic inflammation.
That's the strong implication. What was really striking was that in the non-industrialized groups, their inflammation levels generally stayed stable across their lifespan. When inflammation did spike, it was linked to actual infectious diseases, things their bodies needed to fight off.
Not the chronic age-related diseases like heart disease or diabetes we see linked to inflammation in industrialized nations.
Exactly. It completely reframes the conversation.
Wow, that's a pretty fundamental shift. It suggests this hallmark of aging might actually be modifiable, dependent on our environment, our choices.
Precisely. It opens up entirely new avenues for research. It's not just about managing inflammation with drugs, but understanding and maybe altering the root causes embedded in our modern lives.
It almost puts more power back in our hands, suggesting lifestyle choices could be even more potent anti-aging tools than we realized.
It certainly points in that direction, focusing not just on biology, but on the environment we create for our bodies.
Fascinating stuff. Okay, so we've talked interventions, both systemic like TPE and specific like rapamycin, and this rethink on inflammaging. Let's switch to the tools. How are we actually measuring aging?
Technology, yes, that's moving incredibly fast too.
And one tool really stood out in the research our team reviewed, a brain scan analysis called Dundin-Passy-NI. What's the story there?
Dundin-Passy-NI is, well, it's pretty revolutionary. It's an AI algorithm.
AI, okay.
Developed by a collaborative research team, and what it does is estimate your pace of biological aging using just a single standard structural MRI brain scan.
Just one scan. How
Hi.
accurate can that be?
Surprisingly accurate. Its power comes from how it was trained. It used unique longitudinal data information collected from tracking the same people over decades, measuring their physiological decline.
So it learned what faster aging looks like in the brain over time.
Exactly. And its predictability is, honestly, it's stunning. People with faster Dundin-Passy scores, meaning their brains looked like they were aging faster.
Yeah.
They showed faster shrinkage in the hippocampus, a key area for memory. They did worse on cognitive tests. They were actually 60% more likely to be diagnosed with dementia later on.
60%, that's huge.
It is, and it didn't stop there. They were also more frail physically, had an 18% higher risk of chronic disease, and even a 40% higher risk of mortality during the follow-up period.
Wow, just from a brain scan interpretation. The potential seems enormous, doesn't it? Especially since the tool is apparently freely available for research.
Immense potential. Think about identifying people at high risk for things like Alzheimer's or other chronic conditions years, maybe decades, before symptoms show up.
You could target preventative trials much more effectively. Intervene much earlier.
Yeah.
Could be a game changer.
Absolutely. And Dundon Packen and I isn't alone. The research also highlighted those multi-omics platforms we mentioned with TPE.
Right, integrating all that data, epigenome, proteome, metabolome.
Exactly, giving that really holistic, systems-level view of biological age. And then you have digital biomarkers, things tracked by wearables, your smartwatch even.
Offering non-invasive ways to track aging trends.
Right. All these tools are sharpening our ability to measure aging with way more precision than ever before.
Which in turn should accelerate the testing of interventions.
Right.
Faster, more targeted trials.
That's the hope. It's speeding up the entire cycle of discovery and validation.
It really feels like things are moving fast. And speaking of momentum, just a quick pause here for our listeners. If you're finding this insightful and you're listening on a service like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we'd be incredibly grateful if you could pop over and leave us a rating and review for Tomorrow Unveiled.
It genuinely helps new listeners discover the conversations we're having here.
It really does. Okay, so we have these powerful new tools, promising interventions. But this progress inevitably brings up some tricky questions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Ethical considerations, practical hurdles.
Oh, absolutely. With great power comes complexity.
So what are some of the immediate ethical dilemmas that tools like Dindon Pass and I raise?
Well, there's what some call the burden of knowledge.
Meaning?
Imagine getting a score that tells you decades in advance that you have a significantly higher risk for dementia or some other serious chronic disease.
That's heavy.
It is. On one hand, it could empower you to make healthy changes. On the other, it could cause immense anxiety, affect life choices. It really challenges the idea of a right not to know certain things about your future health.
Yeah, I could see that. What else?
Discrimination is a big one, a very real risk.
How so?
If your pace of aging score derived from a scan or other tests became easily accessible, could insurance companies use it to adjust your premiums?
Or employers use it in hiring decisions.
Yeah. Exactly. It could create a whole new layer of biological discrimination based on predicted future health, not current ability. That's a very slippery slope.
Definitely concerning. And what about access to the interventions themselves? You mentioned TPE is expensive.
Right. And the research our team looked at really highlighted this. Expensive treatments like TPE, especially when sought for anti-aging purposes outside of established medical needs, usually aren't covered by insurance.
So it risks creating a divide.
A two-tiered system, yeah.
Yeah.
Where extended health span becomes something only the wealthy can afford. That could seriously worsen existing social and economic inequalities.
Health becoming even more of a luxury commodity.
It's a real danger, and it connects to another point, the gap that often exists between the marketing hype around some of these things and the actual solid scientific evidence.
The direct-consumer clinics promising the moon?
Right. It really underlines how important responsible science communication is. And sticking to that fundamental medical principle, first, do no harm, especially when you're talking about applying procedures to healthy people for benefits that aren't fully proven yet.
That's a crucial point. We need careful navigation as these possibilities become realities. So, looking ahead then, building on all this, where does Healthspan science seem to be going? What are the big emerging themes?
Based on the research trends, it's definitely moving away from searching for a single magic bullet, like one longevity pill.
More complex than that.
Much more. The focus is shifting towards multimodal approaches. Several key themes are emerging. First, maintaining systemic homeostasis.
Keeping the body's systems in balance.
Exactly. Interventions aiming to restore balance across entire systems. Think TPE for the circulatory system, maybe microbiome modulation for the immune system, that kind of holistic view.
Okay, what else?
Second, really understanding and modifying both the micro and the macro environment.
Micro, like inside the body.
Yeah, the immediate environment around our cells. Targeting biochemical signals, the extracellular matrix, the scaffolding between cells, but also the macro environment. Our lifestyle, our diet, our exposure to pathogens like that inflammaging research suggested.
Tackling it from the cellular level and the lifestyle level.
Right. And the third big theme is clearly predict and prevent.
Using tools like Dondin Pass AI.
Precisely. Moving away from just reacting to disease once it hits, towards proactively predicting physiological decline before it becomes irreversible and intervening early.
System balance, environment modification, prediction, and prevention. Makes sense. So for these areas, what are the concrete next steps in research? What needs to happen now?
Well, for things like TPE, the absolute must is larger, longer-term human trials.
Bigger groups, more time.
Yes, and critically, measuring real functional outcomes, cognitive scores, physical performance, quality of life, not just biomarkers, and including proper control groups like that IVG-only arm we discussed.
Got it. What about targeting the cellular environment, the matrix work?
There, the big challenge is translating findings from cell cultures or animal models, like the cardiac ECM rejuvenation seen in rat cells that some sources mention, into safe and effective human therapies. Delivery is key there, too.
And for inflammaging and the environment.
We need to really nail down which specific parts of the industrialized exposome are driving that harmful inflammation. Is it diet, lack of movement, specific gut microbes? And then things like probiotics need proper human clinical trials to prove they actually work as hoped.
And the predictive tools, like Dundon Pay NI.
The next step is applying them to huge existing data sets, biobanks, large cohort studies. See what new correlations emerge, refine the algorithms, and figure out the best way to use them to select patients for future anti-aging trials.
It's all driving towards that core goal, isn't it? Enhancing health span?
Exactly. Compressing morbidity, shortening the period of ill health at the end of life, and enabling more years lived with real vitality and function.
That's the dream.
Yeah.
And if you're finding this exploration insightful and maybe watching on YouTube, please do take a second to like this video, subscribe to Tomorrow Unveiled, and definitely hit that notification bell so you don't miss our future update.
Every bit helps us keep bringing these analyses to you.
So wrapping up, what an incredibly dynamic week in longevity science. We've seen these really promising interventions like TPE being seriously investigated, ongoing work on compounds like rapamycin, and these revolutionary tools like Dunin-Pacini sharpening our view. It feels like a convergence, pushing us towards much more evidence-based ways to extend not just lifespan, but functional life.
It really does feel like a critical moment. Now, obviously, the path from a lab discovery to something that's widely available, affordable, and equitable,
Yep.
that journey is long and complex.
For sure.
But the conceptual shifts we've seen, highlighted this week, new ways to predict aging, rethinking fundamental processes like inflammaging, targeting our environment, that represents a really significant, really promising evolution in how the scientific community is tackling this grand challenge of a longer, healthier life for everyone.
It certainly does. Which leaves us with a final thought, something for you to ponder. As we contemplate these incredible advancements, what new questions does the prospect of a longer, healthier life raise? Not just for us as individuals, but for society as a whole.
What kind of world are we actually building if we all live well, functionally well, into our later decades?
Deep questions. We'd love to hear your thoughts on all this. Whether you're on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think about this longevity update.
We really do read them.
We do. Thank you so much for joining us on Tomorrow Unveiled. We hope you'll continue exploring the future with us.